This story was written and provided by Jonathan Heinly. In 1987, there was a town in New Mexico that housed an academy for the Navajo, run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs but owned by the Women's Division of the United Methodist Church. This town is Farmington, located in the northeast corner of the state near Four Corners and Shiprock. During the next few years, the Navajo tribe was awarded $1 million for the renovation of the facilities. Finally, the United Methodist Church was put into the position of legally evicting the Bureau of Indian Affairs from their property. The United Methodist Church appointed a missionary to the Navajo mission to begin the eviction of the Bureau and its academy. He was to serve as the director and work towards the development of a new program to replace the school. His name was Thomas Johnson. Thomas and his family moved into a nice two-story blue house on campus that included a sunroom and had an irrigation ditch running along the edge of the property. The campus was made up of 30 buildings on 100 acres. The campus was on the east end of the property. The north end of the property was the bottom edge of a mesa. On top of the mesa was the Farmington Airport. The south border of the property was the main highway that led out of Farmington toward Shiprock. The west end of the property was an open field with a cemetery on the far end. As Thomas began the process of overseeing the eviction of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the staff of the school was cordial as they prepared for their eventual departure. The academy was still in session, and the eviction would occur at the end of the 5 years. As the school was winding down for the year, Thomas began hiring the maintenance and security staff that he would need for the care of the property during the summer months. During his transition, one of the academy employees shared that the Navajo mission had been cursed by the Skinwalkers. A Skinwalker is one of several varieties of Navajo witch. Technically, the term refers to someone who is using his, rarely her, powers to travel in animal form. The Skinwalkers are human beings who have gained supernatural power by breaking a cultural taboo. Specifically, a person is said to gain the power to become a Skinwalker upon initiation into the witchery way. Although it is most frequently seen as a coyote, wolf, owl, fox, or crow, the Skinwalker is said to have the power to assume the form of any animal they choose, depending on what kind of abilities they need. Witches use the form for expedient travel, especially to the Navajo equivalent of the Black Mass, a perverted song, and the central rite of the witchery way, used to curse instead of to heal. They also may transform to escape from pursuers. The Skinwalker will try to break into the house and attack the people inside, and will often bang on the walls of the house, knock on the windows, and climb onto the roofs. Sometimes a strange, animal-like figure is seen standing outside the window, peering in. A Skinwalker may attack a vehicle and cause a car accident. The Skinwalkers are described as being fast, agile, and impossible to catch. Though some attempts have been made to shoot or kill one, they are not usually successful. Sometimes a Skinwalker will be tracked down, only to lead to the house of someone known to the tracker. It is said that if a Navajo was to know the person behind the Skinwalker, they had to pronounce the full name, and about 3 days later, that person would either get sick or die for the wrong that they had committed. Legend has it, Skinwalkers can have the power to read human thoughts. They also possess the ability to make any human or animal noise they choose. A skinwalker may use the voice of a relative or the cry of an infant to lure victims out of the safety of their homes. Skinwalkers use charms to instill fear and control in their victims. Such charms include human bone beds launched by blowguns, which embedded themselves beneath the surface of the skin without leaving a mark, and human bone dust, which can cause paralysis and heart failure. Skinwalkers have been known to find traces of their victims' hair, wrap it around a potsherd, and place it into a tarantula hole. Even live rattlesnakes are known to be used as charms by the skinwalker. The curse that this skinwalker placed on the Navajo mission was that every director would have heart problems and failed marriages. Of course, Thomas brushed off the threat as a foolish myth. He went on about his work. Then, some months later, his dog was barking. As he went out to check, the barking suddenly stopped. He found his large Doberman lying on the ground, dead. There was no sign of foul play. Within weeks, he had developed a heart condition that required regular doctor visits. Then, on one early morning, at the top of the stairs, he confronted a being that began to wrestle him. He slipped and fell down the steps, striking his head on the radiator next to the front door. From that day forward, his behavior became more erratic and unbearable. His wife, unable to cope, finally left him. Thomas was forced to retire. As 1990 came and the eviction was to occur, the United Methodist Church appointed another missionary to serve as an interim director to oversee the actual eviction and begin looking for new programs to operate on the property. Keith Gordon brought his family to the campus and moved into the blue two-story house. The eviction was to occur at the end of the semester. As summer was nearing, he hired extra maintenance staff and employed a security firm to care for the buildings during the summer months. One of the BIA Academy staff shared with Keith that he was a code taker during the war. He also shared the story about the previous director and the Skinwalker curse. He went on to share about another director from years past who had a son who had drowned in the irrigation ditch next to the house. He claimed that staff and students occasionally see Jimmy as he would warn them away from the ditch. Keith just took these stories as an attempt to try and scare him off, and he brushed them off as foolishness. Summer had arrived. School was over and the Bureau of Indian Affairs Navajo Academy had been evicted. The only staff on campus during the day was the few maintenance employees. The only staff at night was Jerry, the maintenance director who lived on the west end of the campus, and the security officer who would complete his rounds on schedule. Each night, the maintenance director would check each building and make sure all locks were secure and lights were off. One of Keith's responsibilities was to begin the renovation of the buildings on campus. He entered into a cost-plus relationship with a local contractor. Beginning with the Dodge Hall dormitory, they began the repairs building by building. He also began meeting with various community agencies to discuss potential programs for the campus. The first unusual occurrence happened when the security officer knocked on his door in the middle of the night to inform him that there was a red glow coming from Dodge Hall. He called the maintenance director and the three of them went over to the dormitory. The doors were locked, but they could see the glow. Jerry opened the door and Keith entered into a blast of heat and found a stove top burner turned on in the first apartment. They turned off the burner and decided to check the other buildings. On that night, they discovered the fans running in the gymnasium, ovens turned on in the dining hall, and lights on in other buildings. The security officer said that he wasn't hired to protect the facility from ghosts, and he quit. A few weeks later, Jerry noticed that the lights had come on in the third floor of Dodge Hall. He quickly ran up the steps, turned off the lights, and exited and locked the doors again. Keith Gordon had come to Farmington with his wife and children with the intent of starting over again. Keith and his wife went through a terrible ordeal because of an affair that she had, but they decided to try to make their marriage work. Suddenly, without explanation, she chose to leave and return to the community they had left behind them. "Is she coming back, Daddy?" The youngest son asked his father.
I don't think so, son.
She never returned. As I stated earlier, the Farmington Airport is located on top of the mesa on the northern edge of the campus. There was some debris on the hill near the top of the mesa. In that debris was a large round piece of concrete with the opening for a manhole cover. It looked like a giant-sized concrete donut. Without explanation, the concrete donut righted itself and rolled down the hill. It rolled through the campus without hitting any building. It then turned in the courtyard toward the west. It continued to roll through the campus and on into the field. It went all the way to the graveyard. It didn't hit any gravestones until finally crashing into the center stone. It spun around and fell on the shattered marker. The person buried in the grave was a close relative of the foreman overseeing the repairs. After that incident, the foreman didn't show up for work. The contractor was concerned because this was out of character for him. Weeks later, he was located at a bar between Farmington and Shiprock. This unusual occurrence did not keep Keith from continuing his mission. He continued the renovation and his meetings with community agencies. Finally, a decision was reached with the Navajo tribe to open a preparatory school on the property. With that agreement, the tribe chose to cover 70% of the cost of the renovations. The church will continue its mission on campus in conjunction with the tribal school. The new school opened in September, and many of the best students from the reservation were selected and began moving into their dorms. It was an exciting time for all. Keith and the contractor were standing on the balcony of the administration building looking over the work that was being done, watching the students walking from dorms to classrooms, and watching Keith's sons riding their bikes on the sidewalk. While standing there, they witnessed Jerry's unmanned utility truck turn 90 degrees and drive across the courtyard. Students ran, screaming that there was no one driving. The truck drove up over the curb, through the grassy area without hitting the sprinkler heads, swerved around a tree, and then struck a vehicle parked on the other side of the courtyard and in front of the administration building. This occurred in full view of the students and staff and Keith's sons. Once the new school was in place and Keith had finished his work as the interim director, he was assigned to a new project in West Virginia. He had developed a dust allergy and began taking prescription medications to control the sinus problems he was having. Then he noticed he was having pains in his chest. The doctor completed a series of exams, including an echocardiogram, and discovered that he had a condition called mitral valve prolapse. Remember the curse that the Skinwalker placed on the Navajo mission, that every director will have heart problems and failed marriages. It makes you wonder,